So for today's video, I wanted to share with you the description the author Robert A. Russell gave concerning the prodigal son, which is a parable from the scriptures. The way he explained it also gives a very great insights into the workings of our own consciousness and how to go about making a drastic change for ourselves. Now he titled this second chapter, through which he talked about this parable, God works through a united self, which is also another interesting statement to make, because the whole premise of his books is also again to remind the reader that God that they're looking for is actually residing within them and working in and as their consciousness. This is what it is all about. Though I tried looking up some pictures of this author, I couldn't find any for some strange reason, so we'll just have to work with the cover of one of his books, or at least this is one of the covers. I mean, there's many different versions it seems. Regardless, hopefully it will give you some new insights into the power of your own consciousness, so let's get right into it. And Jesus said, a certain man had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falleth to me. And the father divided unto them his living. And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together, and took his journey into a far country, and there wasted his substance with righteous living. And when he had spent all there, arose a mighty famine in that land, and he began to be in want. And he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed swine. And he would fain have filled his belly with the husks that the swine did eat, and no man gave unto him. And when he came to himself, he said, How many hired servants of my father's have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and will say unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee, and I am no more worthy to be called thy son. Make me as one of thy hired servants. And he arose and came to his father. But when he was yet a great way off, his father saw him, and had compassion, and ran and fell on his neck, and kissed him. And the son said unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven, and in thy sight, and I am no more worthy to be called thy son. But the father said to his servants, Bring forth the best robe, and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand, and shoes on his feet. Bring hither the fatted calf, and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For this my son was dead, and is alive again. He was lost, and is found. And they began to be merry. Now his elder son was in the field, and as he came and drew nigh to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants, and asked what these things meant. The servant said unto him, Thy brother is come, and thy father hath killed the fatted calf, because he had received him safe and sound. And the elder son was angry, and would not go in. Therefore came his father out, and entreated him. And he, answering, said to his father, These many years do I serve thee, neither transgressed I at any time thy commandments, and yet thou never gavest me a kid, that I might make merry with my friends. But as soon as this thy son was come, which had devoured thy living with harlots, thou hast killed for him the fatted calf. And the father said unto him, Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. It was meet that we should make merry and be glad, for this thy brother was dead, and is alive again, and was lost, and is found. Now, if you haven't read the parable of the prodigal son for yourself, I suggest you do that, because you can look this all up for free on Google. However, now we're going to jump into the chapter of Robert Russell, where he started to explain this parable to the reader, and to this video to you as well. Now he wrote the following. The parable is about you. It is about every man. It is a story of a young man who binds himself by his own freedom. You too make your own fetters. The prodigal son wanted something he did not know he had, but he did not know himself either. He had not examined the life for which he was made and the reason for his being, but he wanted as desperately to find himself as you do. The impetus to search for the true self is a tremendous God-given urge, which demands satisfaction. The prodigal son said to his father, Give me the portion of the goods that falleth to me. And Robert added to that, I'm of age now, and I want to see life. I want to have a good time. How can a fellow get anywhere around here? There are too many restraints. There is too much discipline. I want my freedom. Have you too not made unjustified demands upon life? Demands based on taking and not earning, on getting and not giving, on receiving and not sharing. So away he went. He separated himself from his father. He was tired of the old home. He sought a different kind of life. He sought happiness, greater satisfaction and thrills. But he didn't find them. He sought freedom and found bondage. He sought the satisfaction of the flesh and he found a pig's living. The more he sought, the less he found. I'm going to live my own life, he said. But he was thinking only about that part of his life that appeared on the surface. He had given no thought to the emotional, mental and spiritual hungers that are beyond and above the personality. Everything went wrong. He was miserable and homesick. The thought of his father and of his home was constantly before him, and it was his homesickness that saved him. Deep in your heart too is the longing for a full life, or you wouldn't be reading this book. The persistent search for God, for true peace, for the spiritual self, is inherent in man. We instinctively know that our true home is with the Father who made us, and we are homesick when we separate ourselves from Him. No one told the prodigal son to leave his home. No one forced him into that far country. It was his own choice. Hills are always greener far away, but the far country produced no hills so green as those at home, and he wasted his substance in righteous living. His materialistic thinking reduced him to penury and want. He had to seek help from anyone who would give it to him. Do you see how dark Jesus is painting this picture? Here is a young man who had everything and traded it for nothing. He joined himself to a citizen of their country, and he sent him into his fields to feed swine. Note the word sent. He wasn't taken to the fields, he was sent. Where now were his independence and freedom? And what wages did the citizen offer? Apparently none, for Jesus says, he would have fain have filled his belly with the husks that the swine did eat. Imagine that. He was so hungry that he would have settled for pig's food, but no man gave unto him. Why not? Because that is the way personality acts. Did you ever get into a spot in which every door seemed closed, and you turned from one person to another for help and found in the end that no man gave unto you? Is it any wonder that the prodigal's thought kept turning back to the great sufficiency in his father's house? And when he came to himself, he said, "How many hired servants of my father's have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger?" When he came to himself, this was the turning point, the great awakening. He now took stock. What am I doing out here in this terrible place? How did I get here? This isn't my true home or the way I was supposed to live. I don't belong here. I should like to go home. Well, why don't I go? No one here will stop me. I am going home. I shall tell my father I was wrong. I shall accept whatever he gives me. I'll work to regain my place in his heart. The prodigal has looked at himself. He knows that he must change. He acknowledges that his troubles and despair are self-inflicted. To get back to his home and to enjoy its benefits, he realizes he must take action. He has proved that he cannot look to others for his good. When he came to himself, and when you open your consciousness to truth, you discover that in reality you have never been away from the Father's house at all. You have merely tried to locate your good outside yourself. Living away from God, seeking material things external to you, you have let the resources of your lower self dry up, and are compelled to seek that which is above and beyond you. The Father had given the Son what he asked. He divided unto them his living, but he did not compel him to remain at home. Why not? Because man has individual volition and choice. He can do what he pleases and go where he chooses. Have you too not learned that by many a bitter experience? And when he came to himself, he said, well, said what? To whom? He was talking to himself. Who ever heard of such a thing? Does a sane man talk to himself? Does he put the I on one side of the table and the me on the other and then have a good conversation? Well, that is exactly what he does. The I and the me converse with each other. And what does the I say to the me? It says, I will arise and go unto my Father. I will stop being this personal man of duality, doubt, fear, sin, selfishness, and limitation, and start being the Christ man of dominion, power, harmony, happiness, and prosperity. I will embody the Christ in everything that I think, say, and do. What is not right in my experience will be adjusted. What is sick will be made well. What is sinful will be made pure. What is weak will be made strong. What is poor will be made rich. The prodigal's hunger is your hunger. His mistakes are your mistakes. His extremity is your extremity. His frustration is your frustration. His emptiness is your emptiness. He tried to satisfy one part of himself at the expense of another part, and it didn't work for him any more than it does for you. What a shock it must have been when he saw the mess he had made of things. Then out of the depths of his loneliness and desolation came the voice. You do not need to stay the way you are. You do not need to stay in the filth and stench of the pig pen. Leave that old self which has separated you from your birthright. Go back home, get right with yourself. Do you hear that voice saying to you, let the creative purposes of God be expressed in you? And then came the transformation, first the great awakening, and when he came to himself, then the great decision, I will arise and go to my Father and will say unto him, Father, I have sinned. The first step in correcting a mistake is to acknowledge that you have made it. The second step is to seek forgiveness for it. Your forgiveness of yourself and the forgiveness of the one you have injured. The prodigal is tired of his character he has assumed. Trouble has so hashed him round that he is willing to do anything. I will arise and go to my Father, and I will say unto him, Father, I have sinned, and I am no more worthy to be called thy son. Make me as one of thy hired servants. This is quite a come down. He is asking to be demoted. He is willing to do anything. He has lost his false pride. He has recognized the nothingness of personality. He has become receptive to the idea of his place in his Father's house, of his true purpose in life. Notice the difference in his attitude. When he left his Father's house, he said, give me. When he returned, he said, make me. Between these two attitudes is the difference between poverty and plenty. The prodigal's difficulty, you see, was that he was trying to live by bread alone. He was like many true students who seek answers and results without discipline and without surrender to the principle, who seek the abundance of the Father's house without developing the consciousness that produces it. The prodigal wanted success, but he got failure. He wanted happiness, but he got sorrow. He wanted thrills, but he got boredom. He has reached the limit of his endurance. He is reversing all of the beliefs, ideals, and thoughts that have betrayed him. He is rooting them out. He is determined to be a son again and is ready to do anything to reclaim his rightful inheritance. Make me. The important thing now is not what he can get from his Father, but what the Father can accomplish through him. Make me is really the key to the Father's house, and no one can enter without it. To be forgiven, you must repent. You must reverse your thought. You must change it out of the old condition and keep it changed into the new. Now this is very interesting. First of all, he says, the important thing is not what he can get from his Father. Again, what we mean by this is from what we can get from the universe, but what the Spirit of the universe can accomplish through us. What does it want to accomplish through you? You gotta ask yourself that question. It's vitally important, because that will lead you onto the road of your own individual unique expressions in life. It's what leads you to your passions in life. You know, your passions, again, as we say in previous videos, are what the universe wants to express with and through you. Now, this other part that Robert wrote was, you must reverse your thought. You must change it out of the old condition and keep it changed into the new one. I made a video about this months ago called The Mental Equivalent. It was a lecture by Emmett Fox, and that is exactly what he would say as well. If you want to change stuff around in your life, you gotta change your thought and keep it changed into the new condition of what you desire to express and demonstrate in your life. That is essentially what Robert said here as well. It's absolutely important. That's the power behind this whole prodigal son parable. Now Robert goes on to say, now comes the great moment. As the son turns toward the father turns toward the son. When he was yet a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion, and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. There was no penalty for his waywardness, no penance for his sin, and the cancellation of his sin was complete. Before they call, I will answer, and while they are yet speaking, I will hear, God says. All you need to do is change your attitude to take the step homeward. Eyes have not seen, nor ears have heard. Neither has it entered into the heart of man the things which God has prepared for them that love him. Now the son returned to his father's house, and there is a great rejoicing. Everything is showered upon him, the ring, the best robe, the fatted calf, new shoes, the luxuries of home. Now this is also where I will stop the rest of this explanation by Robert Russell, because the chapter goes on for quite some time. But you see, these are the most important parts, the key parts he shared there right now, then and there from the ancient texts. What this all is saying, this parable, is essentially that right now we're so obsessed with our physical lives. You see, a person goes off to a faraway country, this prodigal son goes to a faraway country. Well, I like to tell people in private concerning this parable that that so-called faraway country could also be described as the physical world in which we find ourselves right now. Your consciousness is operating with and through your body. Right now you're finding yourself on this planet, in the circumstances whatever they are. If you want to improve those circumstances, we're going to have to learn to trust in God. We're going to have to learn to trust in the universe, which ultimately means we're going to have to trust in ourselves, that we're capable of changing things around for the better, and that we no longer have to be a slave towards our own circumstances. We don't have to keep letting it control us. We don't want to let anything control us at all. We want to be in control of ourselves. That is the basic foundation and idea behind the prodigal son. And we all go through this process if we really think about it. I can say this from personal experience myself. When I was growing up, of course, for a certain amount of time in life, we tend to be more focused on the physical side of things alone. And some people actually keep doing this until the moment they pass away. But yet there's other people, even like me, myself right now, and you, that we start to consider, wait a minute, is there more to my consciousness than I may have known while growing up? Is there more to me than meets the eye? Yes, there is. Another thing I like to remind people of in private is that if we're talking about the spiritual self, some people, they have really a lot of difficulty accepting that concept and what that means. A spiritual self? It sounds so mysterious. Well, let me put it differently. Your consciousness, your imagination are two invisible powers that you are operating with right now. That is part of who you really are. That is part of the spiritual self. The spiritual self is basically a description for things that are not physically visible. You see, when a thing is not visible physically to us, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. That's quite fascinating, isn't it? Another thing I would add to that is that when you go to sleep at night and you start dreaming, well, where do the dreams take place? Where is the location? I always tell people, can you pinpoint its location where you had the dream specifically? Where was it all taking place? Those things that felt just as real as what it feels like being supposedly awake right now. It all feels just as real. Well, they're all indications of your spiritual nature. They're all showing you, giving you evidence of your true spiritual self. And that true spiritual self is, again, a son, you could say. A son, a daughter of the spirit of life, of God, the Father. You know, your father's house has many mansions, as it was also written. Well, through your imaginations you can enter many realms. And those are all existent within the, well, house of the Father. The spiritual atmosphere of the universe itself. For people who are not spiritually inclined as much, this might all be tricky to grasp. But the prodigal son is absolutely a fascinating and beautiful story. That's why I suggest to you again that if you haven't read this parable for yourself, I suggest you do that after this video. If you know about the parable but you never really knew what it was truly all about, well, hopefully it gives you a better indication, because Robert even said himself, you don't want to read the parable just from a point of history where you're like, this is about some guy that had a wild lifestyle and then found his way back to his father. Now this is about us individually going through the similar processes in life. We're so focused on the physical side of life, and then we realize it can't bring us the happiness that we actually seek, because things will always fall apart sooner or later. In this physical side of life, things are born and they die. So making ourselves dependent on them is a bad thing. It doesn't mean we don't enjoy them. We don't enjoy the company of other people or things that we have. But we don't want to become dependent upon them. We want to understand the power behind them that gave them form and life. That is the goal, you see, that is the goal of spiritual growth. Once you start doing that, you'll start to find your Father's house, as they describe in Scripture. It's absolutely beautiful. Anyways, that is what I wanted to share with you through this video today. A few key points that he shared concerning this parable. And with that being said, dear viewer, never forget that we are the dreamers.